I am a professor of education at the NEAG School of Education, the University of Connecticut. And today I just finished a workshop on transition, and I was quite pleased and actually surprised by the number of people that attended the workshop. Here we are, at this point I'm talking in the month of August, towards the very end of the month of August. And I know it's a busy time for people coming to the end of the summer and with all the preparation for the new school year coming. And so when I agreed to do a presentation on transition, I expected maybe there might be 10, 11, 12 people that would show up. So the word went out, and the idea was promoted, and the next thing I knew, it took less than 24 hours and the workshop filled to capacity. Clearly, transition is an important topic, and I can't stress enough how important it really is. I put a focus on my presentation on the 18 to 21-year-old, because for as much as has happened in the field of special education for students with disabilities, I can't say the same about that 18 to 21-year-old group of students for whom this opportunity to continue their education, and not necessarily in the school building, but to continue their education, learning about the skills that are so critical to being able to have a job, to be able to maintain a job, the skills that might be necessary if they choose to go on to post-secondary education, learning more about independent living and what that all implies. What are the dreams that they have? What are the aspirations of their family? All of that comes to fruition in the area of transition. What I tried to do in my presentation today was, number one, to present the law, the rights, the critical elements of transition programming for students with disabilities. Then I shared some data relative to what are some of the outcomes of transition for students with disabilities. This particular provision, transition provisions, have been in effect since 1990. And they came into being because they are the residual benefits of some of the early initiatives that created the special education laws in the first place in 1975. The fruits of that law and the impact that it had on raising expectations had the power of building momentum for the creation of the amendments that led to the transition provisions, which now by law require that schools have to focus on transition, which is more than the academics. It includes the domains of employment, it includes independent living, it includes the provision of preparing the student for adult life. And it's not just the immediate life after completion of school, but it's what happens to these kids when they become adults and are going to remain as adults for the rest of their lives. How well prepared are they for being adults in the community? The options that are available are still being discovered. This whole area of transition, in spite of 20 years of history, is not resulting in the kind of outcomes that we can be proud of. We have to look at these outcomes from the perspective of, are the schools having an impact in a positive way on where young adults are going to be working, where they're going to be going to further their education, where they're going to be living, what kind of life are they going to have, whether they're being prepared for learning about good nutrition for the future, how to take care of themselves, whether they're learning how to take care of themselves physically and emotionally. These are all part of becoming an adult. And unfortunately, for all too many students with disabilities, particularly the group that is 18 to 21 years old, who are still eligible for public education, the kinds of services that they are still getting from the public schools is not fulfilling their needs to the extent that we would expect and hope based upon the optimism that so much of special education has created in our field. For example, one of the outcomes very unfortunate outcome is that there is data that suggests that up to 44% of individuals that are incarcerated are individuals with disabilities. How many of those individuals, had they received the appropriate and the correct kinds of services, might not have gone down the path that they ultimately went to? How many people are experiencing behavioral issues because their real challenge is that they still don't know how to read, and that they would rather be perceived as being bad as opposed to being dumb? The whole field of public education and transition is still going through growing pains, and there are plenty of obstacles that are parts of the systems as to how can students focus on and how can schools focus on some of these transition domains when there are all these other responsibilities that have to be met, the classes that still have to be taken for graduation, the different points of view that families may have, that schools may have. What is the role of some of the outside agencies that need to be involved in preparing for the students that are coming in the future? These are still huge obstacles to getting in the way, if you will, of preventing outcomes that would be more relevant to preparing a future generation of students that are coming into the field of the world of adulthood prepared to be adults. And one of the unfortunate side effects of if we are not effective in being able to prepare students who are able to go into the world as productive adults, then that will create some intergenerational issues, because they too will then become parents, and their kids then are going to be affected by their parents' points of view. And there's recent research that points out that parents have a tremendous impact on their students and on their children. And so if we have graduates of programs, or if we have young adults that have left school before completing all the opportunities that were available to them, and they have children, their children are often destined to be living a life and coming through a public education where very little is expected of them from the family. I also introduced a form of evaluation that I have been working on for the last 6 years, called competency-based community assessment. And this is a step-by-step process where my goal was to develop alternatives to some of the standardized community assessments and transition assessments, to be able to literally take young adults who are in that 18 to 21-year-old range and expose them to the real world in a variety of real-world community experiences, and learn from the match between those students and the expectations that are on them when they go into a supermarket, when they go to a restaurant, when they go to the library, when they go to any recreational outlets, that how well do they navigate those systems? And once they've been exposed to these kinds of opportunities, we then have the chance to learn what skill levels they have, what skill deficiencies they need to have filled, and what levels of support. It is an approach to transition assessment that I hope is going to start making a difference in people's lives. It's not for everybody, but it does seem to be a good direction of adding to our repertoire of assessment possibilities for this group of young adults between the ages of 18 and 21.
Thank you very much.